the work your organization does and for inviting Robyn and I to present today. Robyn, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Good, and we can hear you. So the way we're going to do this, I'm going to kind of get started with a little bit of an overview on the topic, and then Robyn's going to talk about specifically some of the stuff that they're doing at Pomfret, and we'll kind of interrupt each other and go about our topics that way. And then, you know, like Karen said, if we have questions, if people have specific questions, feel free to type them in the chat box or use the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll make sure we get everything answered. So where I want to start is kind of big picture, how did we get here? And what I mean by here is really a couple different things. It's the multi-screen world, it's responsive web design, and then it's its impact on schools. So first thing I want to talk about is the multi-screen world and what we mean by the multi-screen world. In order to do that, I like to kind of take a little bit of a historical perspective. If we go back to sort of the dawn of computing, the people at Xerox PARC really quantified computing in these sort of three different phases. First phase was the mainframes, which were essentially many people using one computer. Then we had the advent of the personal computer and one-to-one, and certainly schools talk about their one-to-one programs. And that, you know, for most of our lives and most of the last 30 years, that's what computing has looked like. But more recently, sort of since 2000, and at an incredibly sharp climb here, is the dawn of what's called ubiquitous computing. Ubiquitous computing is this concept that, you know, one person, many computers. So computers obviously could be smartphones, could be tablets, could be laptops, but also could be televisions, could be the GPS system in your car. So, you know, it's conceivable that we even have more computers in our life than we realize. So this trend is resulting in what we're now seeing, which is this sort of multi-screen world, where it's no longer 1,000 pixels wide and, you know, staring at your desktop or your laptop. It's now, you know, this plethora of devices accessing your internet content. This is just a quick kind of benchmark for the month of August. WhippleHill serves up web pages to close to 450 school communities, and this is what it looked like from our perspective in August. We saw about 13% of the pages being served up to smartphones, about 11% being served up to tablets, and almost 76% served to sort of desktops and laptops. So big takeaway here is that, you know, nearly already today, or not even today, in August, 2 months ago, we were seeing a quarter of our traffic going to these sort of non-traditional devices. Google has recently done a lot of research on this. They issued a great report and had some pretty amazing findings regarding specifically the use of smartphones as common starting place for online activities. So Google announced that 65% of all searching starts on a smartphone, planning a trip, 47%, managing financial services, watching videos. So at first glance, you might think this is preposterous, but then I think if many of us stop and think about what we do with our smartphones, it isn't such a big stretch. You know, my bank has an app, and I transfer money and check my balance all the time. In fact, I can't remember the last time I did that on a device other than a smartphone, or shopping or looking up flights. So we're seeing this across the full continuum of activities that people do on the internet. And of course, your school's, you know, shopping for a new school, or you know, looking up homework or checking grades. There's absolutely no reason to believe, you know, that's not gonna follow this trend if it's not there already. The other significant thing is that the experience that your consumers, your customers, for lack of a better word, are going to expect is the bar is quite high. So, you know, they're used to trading stock on E-Trade, buying books on Amazon, checking their balance on Bank of America, booking travel on Kayak. These systems work very well. They have a certain user experience regardless of what device you're on, and it's fair to say your parents, you know, if they don't already, are going to begin to hold you accountable to that same standard. So take, for example, Zappos. Zappos is very savvy when it comes to using the internet and thinking about the implications. And if a quarter of their customers or half of their customers want to shop on a phone, they're going to stand on their head and make sure that the shopping on a phone experience is as good as their desktop experience. Same with Amazon. So they're optimizing their websites and making them look good on their phones. We're not quite at the point yet where schools are doing this. There's still really a minority of schools, and I think this concept of mobile first, and Robyn's going to show us some Pomfret data that's going to reinforce this even more. But this idea that we almost, if you look at the trends and you look at the rate at which smartphones are taking over traffic, you're sort of crazy to not redesign your website and think first about what it's going to look like on the left and secondarily what it's going to look like on the right. And we'll get into why in a second. I am seeing in higher ed, examples of this. NDedu is a good site if you want to look at it. In fact, I'm going to just quickly, let me just back out of here for 1 second. And just touch a little bit on what exactly we're talking about when we talk about optimizing for a phone. So let's pull up ND.edu, and you can see this is what this website looks like when I look at it on my desktop. Robyn, is it keeping up? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, it's keeping up just
Yep.
fine. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So now as I resize the screen, you can see the design is fluid and it's adjusting itself. So this is what it's going to look like on my iPad, and then all the way down to this is what it's going to look like on my phone. So you can see, and we're going to get into more of the specifics of responsive web design, but this idea that one website can be all things. It can be a desktop website that looks good when you look at it on your laptop, and it can also look good when you scroll down and look at it on your iPad, or when you look at it all the way down on your phone. So that's sort of the new standard. I would say maybe 5% of all independent schools are responsive at this point, have an RWD website. But that's definitely, a trend and something we're seeing. Every site that's being redesigned, every project we're embarking on now, that's a requirement. Is that they want to see exactly what it's going to look like. If we look at Ms. Porter's here, what does it look like on the desktop, and then we've got to go all the way down, and we got to make sure it looks good on the phone as well. So it's both ends of the spectrum. So I've got some examples. I know Karen's going to distribute Robyn and my deck when we're done, and I've pasted some examples in here. If you want to look at this and look at these in more detail, you certainly can. I think higher ed is sort of leading the way in this. They're spending more money on the web, and maybe some of the examples out there are a little better constructed at this point. So certainly look at this Notre Dame one. I think this Washington EDU one is very good. This Regent College one is very good. And then this is another WhippleHill example. In addition to the Pomfret example, would be this Crossroads Academy. I think they've done kind of a nice job of arranging their information so it looks good across all devices. So that's sort of the first part of this. Is if you buy into the fact that these devices are taking over, and that our consumers are going to be looking at our schools, our parents, and alumni are going to be looking at our schools on these devices. The next question is how, right? So if you sort of subscribe to the fact that this is something you need to address, the big question is, how do we get from point A to point B? And I think one of the important things to consider is that the how is evolving. So if we go back 3 or 4 years, 5 years to when the iPhones first came out, there was definitely a little bit of craze around the native apps, and there was a moment in time when WhippleHill, for example, and our competitors as well, were offering schools a native app. So Pomfret would have had the Pomfret app, and they'd have had it in the Apple App Store, and you could have installed it. The problem with that is that, unfortunately, there are too many choices. So even though the iPhone is a popular platform, we've got Windows, we've got Droid, we've got different OSs, different operating systems that we need to support. So, as tempting as it is to build a native app, you're sort of quickly faced with the fact that your parents and your alumni don't really take too kindly to you telling them what devices to use. And the reality is to try to build a native app for all 5 of these platforms would cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you're left with, how do we, what's a sustainable, what's a way that we can manage this ongoing without, making more work and creating more cost for ourselves? And that's where this concept of responsive web design comes in. So instead of using native apps that are in the App Store, we're essentially just using HTML and the same technology we use to build websites, but by using this approach called responsive web design, or RWD, we're able to build websites that can scale and that can look great across all these devices. So even though I may at times talk about iPhones, the reality is everything I'm showing you here would look fantastic on every one of these devices. It's not device specific. So this phrase was coined in 2010 within the web development community, which is probably a little bit ahead of where your typical school is, but 2012 was dubbed sort of the year of RWD, so that saw major inroads and big websites like the Boston Globe and many others kind of adopt RWD strategies in 2012. And here we are, 2/3 of the way through, maybe even 3/4 of the way through 2013, and we're finally starting to see traction, within the school communities. But the reality is redesigning a website takes 6 months. So even the schools that were on this right from the word go, were still, it was late 2012, early 2013 before we started to see it in independent schools. Again, it's cost effective because you only have one version of your website that scales. You don't have to create a mobile app and a website. So it's the same thing. It does take a little bit of extra time and energy to get your mind around a website that's going to be fluid and that's going to be adjusting, but there are definitely techniques for that. And again, we're utilizing HTML and CSS3, which are widely adopted standards that make doing this that much easier. In addition to this, just kind of a little bit more background before I get to Robyn and before I let her talk about Pomfret. Responsive web design, there are kind of 2 big principles that we probably should talk about. You heard me use the word fluid. There's this concept of the fluid grid, which is a framework that sits invisibly behind your website that we're now designing stuff to fit on the fluid grid. And that's the sort of magic of RWD, is that once I say, where the image is going to live on the grid, then when the device changes or when the orientation of the device switches from landscape to portrait, the grid is able to uphold the integrity of the design. So that's what the fluid grid is. I'll show you an example on the next slide. The other piece, which is really key, is this concept of a media query. Sounds like a little bit of a technical term, but what this basically means is that from within the design, we can actually query and figure out what device you're on. So we can do things like, hide or show different aspects of the design based on what device you're on. And as a result, you end up with, some neat effects. So like, let's look at, I'll pull up another worldwildlife.org. So here's another site I think is very good RWD site. So you see they have all their menus and their navigation, a lot of stuff going on at the top here. And as I go down, the media query is actually going to cause it to hide all the menus. So see how we go from having this complexity that makes sense on the laptop to actually suppressing it in favor of 2 options and this thing called a hamburger menu, which is how I get to the complexity that was suppressed. So part of the beauty of RWD is that it's fluid. So this goes from 4 pictures wide to 2 stacked on top of each other. That's what the fluid grid gets you. But the other beauty is the media query and the ability to make aesthetic decisions like hiding and showing based on the device you're on. So those are really the 2 kind of primary things as web designers that we have to work with when we're trying to build your website is map it to the grid and think about the media queries. This is what that imaginary grid looks like. So you can see it. If you're a print designer, you're probably used to working with a grid anyways. The grids are not really a new concept, but what happens is by tying your design to the grid, we're able to then use this concept of common breakpoints, which are the sizes of the different devices to create that effect of, breaking from 4 columns to 2 columns when you go from tablet to mobile portrait. So that's kind of the underpinnings of how that works. Talked about the hamburger menu and sort of this idea of cleaning up your navigation, decluttering when you get to the smaller devices, which is a really important part of the process. And then my last slide before Robyn shows us some of Pomfret stuff is just also the planning that goes into this. If you think about the illustration on the left here, that was what this looked like 5 years ago, where we were really just designing for 1,000 pixels wide or 1,200 pixels wide. Now, we have to think about what does it look like here, and then in the middle column, you see we decide to move 1, 2, 3 up to the top and move the featured photo down, and then when you get to the column on the right, we decide to get rid of 1, 2, 3, shrink featured down, so you sort of get the sense of the process and the decision making that goes into this. And you can see it does, complicate the design process a little bit, but when you consider the impact this is going to have, and that really the future of communication is really all about, how well your stuff holds up on smartphones and to some degree tablets, I think it's time and money well spent. So that was kind of my real quick dive into RWD and responsive. And what we wanted to do is I wanted to get Robyn involved and have her kind of talk to you a little bit about, where they're at Pomfret and what they're seeing, and then how their strategies have evolved to deal with the multi-screen realities as well. Robyn is a parent from the class of 2016 and also a longtime veteran of independent schools. Before Pomfret was at Wilbraham Munson, and teaches web design courses and works with the school's media team. So she's really in the trenches, and I think is a great resource to kind of share with us some of what she's seeing from her position. Robyn, are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready. Thank you, Travis.
You should try clicking your arrow just to make sure that worked. Good.
Yep.
It's all you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So at Pomfret, we started seeing a trend in all of our community, alumni, admissions, students, faculty, to using more and more mobile devices. And what we saw in some analytics that I pulled this fall, that you can see that our desktop trend is starting to decrease and mobile devices starting to increase. I think I went too far with that one, but
yep.
Yeah.
Go back
okay.
one more. Yeah.
Sorry.
So this is what. I'm sorry. I think I double skipped when we switched. But this is what I showed you what all the WhippleHill traffic looked like, and then this is specifically what what the screen traffic looks like at Pomfret.
As part of our marketing and communications team, I'm always on Google Analytics and the WhippleHill site and our social media looking at analytics. We talk a lot in our office about return on investment. And I was surprised to see this trend when I looked at device use from a year ago to this fall, the fact that we are definitely seeing more and more people using our site on the mobile devices, and that trend is something we wanted to support with our website going forward. Additionally, in Marcom, we do a lot of surveying, and I highly recommend to schools, if you have the opportunity to collect data from the various groups, that it really does help you plan forward and what you're going to be doing. So you can see here on these screens, we surveyed parents, students, and faculty on what they're looking at, what devices they're using, and how they're using the information, whether they're going to open and read thoroughly, they're going to open and scan. some people just don't read it because they feel they don't need it. But we've modified now our various publications based on a lot of research. So these slides are just showing you, again, data that we have gathered from various parents. We're going to be sending out, the week after Thanksgiving, we'll be sending out to all parents a survey. After, at some point in the admissions cycle, we're going to be surveying all the people who inquired but did not visit. And then we will follow up with surveys with admissions people, those who visited but did not apply. And that gives us a lot of data on how we're communicating with them. Then this slide is interesting because Pomfret has put forth, since I came on board, we've developed a social media plan, and we are putting some time and energy into social media. And through my media team now, the students are playing a bigger role in providing us the life of the school, the daily information. And this is showing you where, this is a parent survey, and I'm kind of curious to see midwinter when we do this again how we'll do with our stats. So media team. I am a firm believer, I've been in private schools for 33 years, and I believe in empowering my students to be able to help all of us showcase our school. I teach a class in website design, I run a media team, and I'm often asking them about how they're seeing the school, what can we do to showcase the school better. So in website design, I have a project where the students evaluate our site and other school sites. The juniors and seniors in the class will look at college sites, the freshmen and sophomore will look at private school sites. And these are some of the words that came up time and time again about how they want it simple. They don't want a lot of depth. They want to be able to find that information. So at Pomfret, we've started really looking at our site. We just did a whole new site, and we're really looking at keeping it clear, concise, a lot of imagery, and directly related to the students' input from the class. This slide is a lot of text, but basically when we decided to look at web vendors and what they could bring to us, we made the decision that we wanted an RWD website. We wanted to be cutting edge. We wanted to build our brand. We wanted people to see our school, and we wanted that site to really show Pomfret from the inside, not what a marketing necessarily guru might want to show, but what the kids want to see. If this day and age, students are being more and more empowered to make decisions, so therefore we need to showcase to the students, can they put themselves here? Can they see through the imagery, the video, and the words? Can they see themselves on our campus? So that comes down to a lot of our strategy and how we're gathering content and using content in newsletters, evites, website. I have 8 digital signs on campus, screens from very big to small, and you'll have a picture in a minute. And we may get one piece of news in, and then we put it out in a variety of ways so that we hit all of our audiences and we give them the information where they are versus trying to make everybody come to us, which we know doesn't work at this point. So e-news. You can see on this slide that we have gone with some analytics to showcase where our open rates were over the last few years. And also, I thought this was great just to show you the evolution of our design from that wide page where somebody could print it out, put it on their refrigerator, versus starting to get into a narrower format. You can see our analytics clearly show that as we worked on developing our style and our design, we were increasing our open rate, and we are now to, see if this will work. I'm not moving forward.
Oh, let's see here.
Can you move me forward?
Yep.
There we go. So we're now to the point, we put out a weekly community newsletter to all parents, students, and faculty. We will occasionally push this out to our email list of admission candidates and their parents. That goes out weekly, and then we have a monthly alumni e-news of the same format, and no matter what device you read it on, you're going to consistently get all the same information. You're not going to have to do the right to left. You're just going to be scrolling down. And our recent open rates have actually jumped to over 60% on average with this. The news and other features within this are played out on our website in various places, so it allows people to be more scannable, on the go, and stay connected to the school.
Oh, I'm not sure why that stopped working. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Email invites, we went the same way. You can see on this slide we have an example of what the invite would look like in about a year and a half ago, but the problem is everybody's busy, so in this day and age starting to see people are blocking images, and images don't load quickly on mobile devices, tablets, phones, etc. So we then have gone to a newer format where all of our email invites now, we use Constant Contact, and we're working a little bit in the CSS, so no matter what people are using or how they configure their email client, they're going to get the content. So they get content first, what I call the pretty, the picture second. And this has really been well received to the point where we just sent out our traditional Lessons and Carols invite. We went with this new style. I was a little nervous, and we had from one of our senior alumni welcome the fact that it didn't look stodgy, and I just thought that word was so interesting on what people might have been perceiving we were doing. We will use this same concept with probably some of our revisit invites and other items that we send out to various constituencies.
Robyn, before you go on to the next one, I just want to make one point. I really do think what you guys have done, it's very easy to just fall in love with a concept like RWD and think it's a silver bullet and that's going to solve all your problems. But RWD doesn't really have anything to do with email. So, your kind of commitment to mobile first and thinking about newsletters that maybe look like 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper and how, maybe opening that on your desktop would be fine. But the attention and just the, your commitment to mobile first and actually redesigning your emails, it's like that's not the kind of stuff that it's just going to automatically do. That takes time and energy and a commitment on your part to reorganize that stuff.
Right. It also takes, with everyone submitting the information and the people who write for us, it's a whole other style of writing. When you look at what information we're putting out to perspectives, what information we're putting out, we have now cut down on word count, and I started the year telling our head of school, Tim Richards, that his email letters can be no more than 500 words. And we're really working on that across everything, that we're looking not just as an RWD website, but in everything we do, moving to that mobile ready.
Thinking about like how pleasant your around the sundial, e-news is to look at on my iPhone, and it doesn't, it's not really a technology thing so much as it is an editorial decision on your part to skinny it down and
Yep.
Focus on just the bare minimum amount of text.
Yep, clean, and in this day and age, all of our groups have clearly communicated with us that they want to be able to see us wherever they are, whenever they are, and we want them to see us in a great light. So we've put a lot of time and attention into every vehicle that we use to make sure that our community stands out, but also that the information we're trying to push out is accurate, reliable, and visually appealing. So whether they get just this ad and they just get Join Pomfret, or they get the picture behind, they're still getting the basic information that they need to make a decision and then, respond or move on. And then that leads back to where Travis has talked about, we went from that kind of standalone mobile site app thing to where now I'm the web designer, the web manager for the school. Everything is based on how it looks, just not on desktop but on the other devices, and we are absolutely, community is in love with the new design and the fact that you can still do almost everything on our big site on the mobile devices. And the hamburger menu, we're working with the pictures on the front screen so that our news and information, everything still plays out well there. This is an example. Whoops, went by.
Robyn, I'm going to switch out and go live for a second to show this example. I think it shows better if we go to your site, Pomfret. So, you know, the reason we put that up was beyond just trying to make your homepage look good. You know, it's about every page looking good. So, you know, here you can see the grid and you can see the different columns, and if we skinny this down, you know, it's going to organize it so that looking at the Who We Are page on your phone is as good an experience as it could possibly be. Where that's where I think a lot of people miss the mark, is you just kind of look at the home page, but in reality what we're talking about is every page has to hold up.
And what we're finding with our visitors is they come, they see the school, they learn about it, and then on their way to the next school or their way home, we're hearing that the students were getting questions back as they're looking at the website. We're getting positive feedback that they're able to leave us with paper, but also leave us with a digital device that they're continuing to learn about us. So I think it's huge to consider your audiences and the information that you put forward to them.
Makes a lot of sense. Do you, as we're going to keep clicking through and go back to some more Robyn's examples, but Karen, I'll throw it out there if people have questions so that we don't need to necessarily save them all until the end. I don't see any that have been entered, so if anybody does have any questions, feel free to type in the question box or the chat box. Karen, have you received any?
No, we don't have any right here now, Travis, so you can feel free to go ahead.
Yep, so if anybody has anything, just go ahead and type it in and we'll divert and make sure we answer questions as we go. Robyn, I'm going to hit play and put it back on.
Okay, so moving on from how do you continue to push out information, have it on your campus, you know, have when prospectives are visiting or people are visiting. We have, again, a digital signage system. These are examples of 3 screens, 3 different locations. You've got the big student center on the left to our library in the middle, and then on the right is in our science building, just a smaller monitor. And we run a very simple show. It's more of a gallery of announcements, student photography, artwork. But the unique thing there is that we then put that on our website so that people see it on campus but also can see it off campus. So parents feel connected when people visit and then go away. I know one of our key guides recently told me the other day that a family said to them, you know, I've been watching your signs on your digital slideshow on your website. So we multi-purpose a lot of our content. This is an example of another way. These 2 slides show you content on our Athletic Hall of Fame kiosk that is pulled right off our website. So the Hilltop News you will find on the website, and people can manually work this kiosk and our athletic schedule. So we're pushing out information every way possible to show the school. So I thought I would share just some of the basic specs that I push out around here and encourage people. The idea of it being scannable, so when we're sending letters, our form deans are sending letters this week, they might be 4 or 5 paragraphs, but we'll break them down and do some bullet points. We'll have the news items, titles of news items, subject lines, 50 characters or less, always putting the school name in them. Same thing with news. We use, if you remember the e-news, we have a title and short descriptions. We want those to be impactful but not spill over too far. So these are all examples of how Pomfret has tried to have some structure to be able to better communicate in all arenas. And one of my famous lines, if it has to be pretty, put it in print. While I'm the Director of Electronic Communications, I do firmly believe in putting some items in print. And then we also have our internal guideline that 3 emails a week to major audiences and no more. So I have a schedule for how we're touching each constituency so we balance what we're doing. And this kind of sums it up. If you don't get to decide what device people are using, so you have to really put your information out there. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Robyn. And I'm seeing a question come in that I'll jump on, and then we'll sort of switch to some more takeaways. But good summary, Robyn, as usual. Thank you.
Welcome.
The question has to do with sort of public pages and what's in front of the password versus what's behind the password. So, and pretty much, let's see here. If I switch gears, hold on a second.
While Travis is switching, I will say that here at Pomfret, we have behind the password, we're a 9 through 12 school PG. We have really only behind the password the information of the student that the parent needs to know. We really have not kept a lot back there anymore. We put everything, our e-newses are on the front end. So we've really gone to the approach that only your student private information, faculty have their own resource board, is on the back end.
Yeah, and the short answer is that the stuff, everything we're saying here applies to the front and the back. And, you know, at least from a WhippleHill perspective, you know, we sort of we see them as two different animals in terms of, you know, you could have an older version of your front-end website that's not RWD, and then our products that you log into. But, you know, the idea is that the stuff you log into has to be RWD as well, and you need to be able to, you know, have menus that work well on the phones and have content that, you know, reorganizes itself to look good on the different devices. So I think the lessons that we're applying here, I mean, if you look at the stat, you know, in Robyn's deck, that just really the staggering, alarming, you know, piece of information from my perspective is this data point right here, which is Pomfret 13% smartphone, 83 and 4, but then if we go back to 2012, 1 year, then this 13% was only 7.5% or 6.5%, and this 4% was only 2%, and that those have doubled in the last year. And that's the thing that's so staggering to me is I think when we look at 2014, all indications are that it's going to double again, and then again and again. And how many times is it going to double until the majority of your traffic is coming from these devices? So, you know, whether they're applying, inquiring, you know, getting homework, submitting an assignment, all of this stuff, you know, if they're not doing it already, it's going to be required that they can do it from their phone in the very near future. So that's the challenge that's facing, you know, not just Robyn and her communication strategies, but companies like WhippleHill who are, you know, trying to help our schools stay ahead of the curve and make sure we can meet that demand. So in addition, and by all means, if there are other questions, toss them in the question box. Just as we're kind of wrapping up here, there was this website I came across through research and this process that kind of outlined some just simple principles for web design, new web design. I just think these are fun to share. One thing we're seeing is this drive towards simplicity. Strong design is made for pure elements, made from pure elements. So I think there was definitely, in the heyday of big monitors and desktop computers, we were looking at trying to jam more and more and more content, and now we're seeing that you know, kind of rotate and become, you know, more, the pendulum is swinging back in favor of simplicity. Specifically, when you look at simplicity on mobile devices, so the idea that using the media queries and forcing, you know, menus and options that don't need to be there to disappear so that stuff looks good on the devices, similar to, you know, Robyn's About Us page, mission, core values, you know, this stuff is, we've stripped away a lot of the fluff, and, you know, it's really straightforward. The fonts are big and bold, and it's very easy to comprehend on a phone. Another item is the concept of a gesture. This often gets overlooked. This doesn't specifically have anything to do with RWD, but if you think about gestures as they pertain to smartphones and tablets, you know, if we look at Choate, this is actually a Silverpoint site that does RWD pretty well, very well. When you reduce it down to your phone, you know, I should be able to put my finger on that picture of the balloon there, and I should be able to swipe my photo and sort of flip my way through the photos using my finger. That's not something that's just going to work automatically. That's a refinement, and it's really important that when we're thinking about our websites on mobile devices, we consider how physical interaction and touch affects the design. So one example might be, you know, you could have a little arrow on either side of that photo, one arrow that, you know, tapping the arrow goes to the next photo, tapping the other arrow goes to the back photo. That little arrow would work great if you were designing for a mouse and a pointer, but those little arrows don't work well for our fat fingers. That, you know, Apple and Google have told us that the swipe is preferred. So, you know, if you find yourself with those little arrows, it's just an indication that you're not really thinking about the device that you're designing for. Motion is another one, making your design sing. You know, bottom line is that I think you know, there's sort of a gaming component that we're seeing emerge within primarily from mobile and tablet devices. Kind of comes from this gesture thing, but the idea that people want there to be some animation and some interactivity. This is a great site, another very solid RWD site, not a WhippleHill site. I'm not sure who built this one, but Madeira.org. When you click on these cards here, they actually animate and they flip over. So there's sort of a whimsical, interactive feel to that, which is you know, very desirable if you can find a way to work that into your design. Scale. We spent a fair amount of time talking about this. You know, we need the Crossroads site that's going to look good in the browser to scale down and look good on the phone. So there's this scaling component. The last point on this, discovery, exploring, being engaging, and I'll just flip over to this Madeira example for a second because I really do think this one is very good. I'd strongly encourage you to look at this one as well. Madeira. I didn't spell it right. And some of these, it's just a matter of time. Like this, Madeira was very early to the game with their RWD, and I think as Pomfret's and Robyn's learning, there's sort of the original task of just trying to get it to hold up on the mobile device, and then there's going to be these next generation. I know Robyn and I were talking about a mashup and an idea that she had for something that was a little more interactive, and it's just going to take a few iterations to get sites to the point where they have this. But when I, you know, see how we're rolling over this, and when I click on it, you know, and I can customize, so I can pick, you know, which things I'm interested in, and then it's going to arrange the cards based on what I'm interested in. So the way that we used to do this would have been using Flash, and if you right-click on this, you'll see there's no Flash here. It's all HTML5 and JavaScript, and this really gives people a, you know, a discovery process within the website. And oh, by the way, if I scroll it all the way down, it actually works on a mobile phone as well. So you see, you know, just because you're on the phone, you don't have to give up that experience. So this one, I think this is probably, you know, this is a second generation RWD site, and they've put a lot of thought into the discovery and into the gestures and into the animation, and it really makes it show well. So those were the examples. Just one other thing I'll throw out there, just a couple of observations, just similar to Robyn's observations at the end of her piece. This summer, we counted the number of pages on the 50 websites we built, and on average, they were 30% smaller than they were the summer before. So I think the simplicity and the desire to make these things work on mobile devices is causing a reduction in size. I think photo selection is very key, portrait versus landscape. Robyn and I have spent a fair amount of time talking about that, from the Pomfret perspective. Her media team spends a fair amount of time talking about and thinking about, specifically shooting for the homepage. So she's got to leave enough white space, enough dead space in the top of this picture. I have no doubt when you composed this, you were thinking about exactly where it was going to go, right, Robyn?
Yes, correct. Yeah. And then, yeah, and with my media team kids, we're now pretty much taking everything landscape.
Right. A lot of photographers prefer portrait, and
yeah.
If you just bring a photographer on campus, you're likely to get photos that are taller than they are wide, which as our screens get wider and as we think about RWD and the size photos we need, that those become harder and harder to use. So just the last piece that I just think is important is the viability of video on smartphones and tablets. The number one use of tablets is watching video. So, and smartphones and tablets are often connected to Wi-Fi. So don't assume there isn't a fast connection, and also don't assume that, just because it's a smaller screen, that there's not a new generation of people who are more than happy watching content on those smaller devices, because the data supports the fact that, for many, that's actually a preferred way to watch a video. So I don't know if that was sort of the last piece of what I had prepared. Robyn, are there any other thoughts or anything you want to add to just some of the stuff we just talked about?
I think the only thing really would be for all schools to consider working with their student leaders and involving them in some of the process. When we went to the new design, we used our students' media team in my class as our focus groups to really get an understanding of where the kids are, how they use the site, so that we could really focus on the marketing side of our site. And I just think the students bring a lot to the table that sometimes those of us more experienced might not look at.
Yeah, and oftentimes there's a class or they're on campus. I know I was working on a navigation system for Proctor, a new one, and we spent, we found a teacher who was willing to use his class and work it into the curriculum to get the kids to fill out the surveys and sort of study how people organize content on the web, and he was able to fit it right in, and we had a tremendously captive audience to get input from, so it was a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, anytime I do something new before it goes live, I take it into the classroom and have my students critique it, in addition to the marketing and communications office here. But they often provide some very interesting insight to what we do.
Absolutely, yeah. It's good. Well, I think, Karen, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. I know we're just about on our time, and I think we've said what we wanted to say. I don't know, Karen, do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, we don't have any more questions coming in. I wanted to thank our audience for tuning in, and a special thank you to Travis and Robyn for providing us with such great information. As a reminder to everyone, this presentation was being recorded and will be made available on the webinar page in the professional development section on admission.org. I want to give Travis and Robyn an opportunity to give their closing, and I'd just like to say have a wonderful day to everyone.
Thanks, Karen. I went back to our title slide. Robyn, I know, is is very generous with her time regarding answering questions. If anybody wants to email her at rcook@pomfretschool.org, and I'm Travis W. at WhippleHill.com. If we can be of any assistance, we will send this PDF to Karen, and she can distribute it.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Thanks to everyone, and have a great
Thanks.
afternoon.
Take care.